She was delivered as a punishment to the most feared Apache warrior, and Yara expected the worst. But when he looked at her, he saw courage where her stepmother only saw a threat. This single moment changed their destinies forever. Hello, my dear friend. I am Ricardo Rodriguez, the narrator of Dreams and Destinies. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Please tell me from which city you are watching us. I send you a big hug, and please enjoy the story. Yara Valdés lived as an uncomfortable presence inside her own home. The afternoon sun fell upon the cracked adobe walls. It painted long shadows that seemed to push her into the corners. She hid where Doña Amalia would not see her. Yara had learned to move without making a single noise. She learned to breathe without occupying more space than necessary. Her father had died 3 years ago. He left her with a last name that truly meant something. He also left her with a stepmother who saw that last name as a threat. Amalia was not a woman of vague whims. She was not a woman of purposeless cruelty. She was calculating. She was like someone who learns to count coins when she knows that hunger arrives with the winter. There were debts to tighten and collections to avoid. She had the certainty that if the inheritance were divided as the law determined, she would lose control. She would lose control over the little that remained. She would return to being what she always feared. She would be a woman without land, completely dependent on the will of others. And Yara was not useless, as Amalia used to repeat to anyone who wanted to listen. She knew how to read, do accounts, and record purchases and sales. She had learned with her father the real value of a load of flour. She knew the value of a saddle and of a thick wool blanket that would resist the desert nights. She also sewed with great precision. She mended clothes and harnesses so that they would last longer than they should. Her hands knew the exact weight of the needle. They knew the exact tension of the thread. But those skills inside that house were interpreted as insolence. They were clear signs that Yara could demand rights and prove truths. Amalia needed a plan that would solve 2 problems at once. She needed to send Yara away forever. She needed to prevent her from appearing alive and lucid before anyone who would recognize her claims. The solution was simple in form and brutal in intention. Expelling her could generate comments and attention from local authorities. Instead, Amalia organized a delivery. In the eyes of the community, it would be interpreted as a punishment. In the eyes of the desert, it would be a sentence. She used intermediaries. They were men accustomed to negotiating with fear and rumors. She chose a name that was enough to impose silence. That name was Kohte. He was known among the white people as the feared Apache. His fame was not built only by legends. There were attacks, ambushes, deaths, and losses. People recounted these as a warning for children. They used them as a justification for the violence of men. It was said that Kohte left no survivors when he attacked a convoy. It was said that his men could appear and disappear like smoke among the rocks. Amalia bet that once in the hands of that leader, Yara would not return to contest anything. Yara did not have a real choice. She was taken like someone who is transferred from one possession to another. She was given the promise that this way she would learn to be grateful. She was given the implicit threat that resisting would put others at risk. For Amalia, that could still be presented as domestic discipline, and if it went wrong, it could be presented as a fatality of the territory. For Yara, it meant crossing a threshold that she did not ask for. It was a threshold that everyone around her pretended was inevitable. On the day of the delivery, Yara did not cry. She packed the little they allowed her to take in a cloth bundle. She took a spare dress, a shawl that had belonged to her mother, and a bone comb. She felt the stares of the men who would escort her. These were men who had eaten at her table when her father lived, and who now looked away. The journey was long and silent. The sun fell vertically on the dry earth, raising waves of heat that made the horizon tremble. Yara looked at the mountains in the distance. They were dark and outlined against the sky. She thought that her life would end there. It would not end with rapid violence. It would end with the slow certainty of someone who gets lost in a territory without forgiveness. The intermediaries left her in a designated place. It was a rocky formation that looked like a closed fist against the sky. They told her to wait, but they did not tell her for how long. One of them was a man with tired eyes who had known her father. He gave her a skin of water and left without looking back. Yara sat on a hot rock, feeling how the sweat ran down her back. The silence of the desert was complete. It was broken only by the distant buzzing of insects. It was broken by the crunching of the earth cracking under the weight of the sun. She waited all afternoon. When the sun began to set, painting the rocks orange and red, she heard the sound of hooves. There were not many, perhaps 3 or 4 horses. She stood up, wiping her hands on her dress. Her heart beat fast, but her breathing remained controlled. She had learned since she was a child that fear is either shown or hidden. She chose to hide it. The riders appeared among the rocks like shadows taking form. They were dressed simply in leather pants, dark shirts, and long hair tied with strips of cloth. One of them dismounted first. He was tall, with broad shoulders and precise movements. His eyes scanned Yara with the same expression he would use to evaluate a load of merchandise. There was no curiosity in that look. There was only calculation. "You are the Valdés," he said in Spanish. It was not a question. Yara nodded and said, "Yes." The man studied her for a moment more. Then he said something in Apache to the others. One of them approached, took Yara's bundle, and checked it quickly. He pushed aside the shawl and felt the dress in search of anything hidden. He found nothing, and the bundle was returned. "You will ride with him," the man said, pointing to one of the riders. "If you try to escape, you will die in the desert before reaching anywhere. If you scream, we will gag you. If you are a problem, we will leave you where the vermin will find you before the thirst does." They were not empty threats, and Yara knew it. She climbed onto the horse behind the designated rider. She clung to the saddle as the group set off. The landscape changed rapidly. They passed rocks, dry bushes, and narrow canyons where the echo returned the sound of the hooves multiplied. Yara lost track of time. She only knew that they were advancing toward the interior of the mountains. They were heading toward a place that no one from the town would ever know. They arrived at the camp when the night had already fallen completely. The place was hidden in a narrow valley. It was protected by rocky formations that made it invisible from a distance. There were small campfires and low tents made of skins and cloth. There was the cautious movement of people who stopped to observe when the group entered. Yara felt the stares. They were not welcoming stares. They were stares of evaluation and of distrust. They held silent questions about what the men of Kohte were bringing now. They got off the horse. Her legs trembled from exhaustion, but she remained standing. The tall man who had spoken to her indicated that she should wait next to one of the campfires. He walked away toward a larger tent. Another man emerged after a few minutes. This one was older, with a face marked by scars. They told stories that Yara would never know. His presence imposed respect without the need to raise his voice. The others stepped aside slightly when he passed. They did this not out of fear, but out of respect. Kohte stopped in front of Yara. He studied her with the same calculating expression she had seen in the first man, but more intense. His eyes were dark and deep. They seemed to see beyond the surface. Yara held his gaze without defiance, but without lowering it either. She had learned that showing fear invited abuse, but showing arrogance invited violence. "Your stepmother paid for us to bring you," Kohte said in clear Spanish, without a strong accent. "She says that you are useless and problematic. She says that you deserve to learn what hard work means." Yara did not respond immediately. She knew that anything she said could be used against her. Finally, she spoke with a calm voice. "My stepmother says many things." Kohte almost smiled. It was a small gesture. It was just a tension in the corners of his mouth. "Here, It does not matter what she says. It matters what you do. If you are a burden, we will treat you like a burden. If you are useful, you will find a place. He turned toward the tall man who had brought Yara. Nahal, let Seyi watch her. Let her learn where she can go and where she cannot. Let them give her water and food. Tomorrow we will see what she knows how to do. Nahale nodded and called a woman who was near one of the campfires. The woman approached with a neutral expression. She was middle-aged, with a face hardened by the sun and hands tanned by work. Her name was Seyi, and her first words to Yara were very clear. If you steal, they will mark you. If you betray, they will kill you. If you work, you will eat. Seyi took Yara to a small tent where 2 other women slept. She gave her a thin blanket and a bowl with water. The food was simple. There were corn tortillas, beans, and a little dried meat. Yara ate in silence, feeling the weight of the stairs. The other women spoke in Apache, and Yara caught only isolated words. She did not need to understand the language to know that they were talking about her. That first night, Yara did not sleep. She stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the camp. She heard the crackling of the campfires that were going out. She heard the distant murmur of voices and the occasional bark of a dog. She thought about the house she had left. She thought about Amalia, counting the days until she could declare the inheritance as her own. She thought about her father, buried under a mesquite tree in land that no longer belonged to her. And she thought about what Kohte had said. If you are useful, you will find a place. It was not a consolation. It was a test. The next morning, Seyi woke her up before dawn. Get up. There is water to bring. Yara got up with her body aching from the journey and the night on the hard ground. She followed Seyi to a nearby stream where other women were already filling skins and pitchers. The work was simple, but exhausting. She was carrying the water back to the camp several times until the containers were full. Yara did not complain. She knew that any sign of weakness would be remembered. During the following days, Yara learned the routine of the camp. She got up with the sun, and she worked until night fell. She brought water, helped prepare food, and mended clothes and harnesses when they asked her to. Seyi watched her with hawk eyes, but little by little began to speak to her beyond simple orders. Do you know how to sew? She asked one day, pointing to a saddle with a broken strap. Yes, Yara responded. Seyi gave her a needle and thread. Do it well. If it breaks when someone uses it, it will be your responsibility. Yara repaired the strap with care. She used the stitch that her father had taught her, the one that resisted tension without loosening. When she finished, Seyi checked the work by pulling the strap with force. She nodded. She did not say well done, but her silence was approval enough. It was during that first week when Yara understood something important. Kohte's group lived under constant pressure. It was not a life of romantic liberty in the mountains. It was calculated survival. They needed food, salt, medicines, cloth, and tools. They obtained those things through exchanges with merchants who operated on the margins of the law. These were men who sold to whoever paid and did not ask questions. But those merchants were treacherous. They adulterated weights and sold products in bad condition. Sometimes they warned the militias about the routes the group used. Kohte governed with a hard hand, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. A wrong decision could mean hunger for everyone. A moment of carelessness could bring soldiers to the camp. Yara saw how he made decisions, listened to his men, evaluated options, and then acted without hesitating. There was no room for errors. One afternoon, while Yara was sewing near the main tent, she heard raised voices. Kohte was speaking with Nahale and 2 other men. They were arguing about a merchant who had promised salt at a good price, but had not appeared at the agreed point. He is selling us to the soldiers, one of the men was saying. He knows our route. He knows when we move. Or he simply decided that it is not worth the risk. Nahale responded. Prices are rising. He can sell the salt to others for more money. Kohte listened in silence. Finally, he said, we need another contact, one who does not play both sides. There are not many, Nahale responded. The ones left are worse than this one. It was then that Yara, without thinking too much about the consequences, spoke. I could review the deals. The four men turned toward her, and the silence was heavy. Kohte studied her with that penetrating look that seemed to read hidden intentions. What do you know about deals? He asked. My father traded with muleteers and miners. He taught me to verify weights and to detect when someone adulterates merchandise. I know how to read contracts, and I know how to do accounts. One of the men let out a brief, contemptuous laugh. A white woman who knows numbers. And what do we gain from that? Yara did not look away from Kohte. You gain that they do not scam you so easily. Kohte did not respond immediately. He stayed looking at Yara with that impossible-to-read expression. It was as if he weighed not only her words, but also the truth behind them. Finally, he turned toward Nahale. Take her to the next exchange. Let her observe. If she detects something useful, we will listen. If it is only noise, she will return to sow in silence. It was not trust, it was a test. Yara nodded without showing the relief she felt. She knew she had taken a step toward something, although she still did not know if it was toward a better place or toward a greater risk. The exchange was scheduled for 3 days later, in a narrow canyon, a 2-hour journey from the camp. Nahale took her along with 2 other men. During the journey, no one spoke to her. Yara rode in silence, observing the terrain, memorizing reference points. If she ever needed to escape, she thought, she would have to know the way. They arrived at the meeting place shortly before noon. It was a well-chosen site. It had rock walls on both sides, a single entrance and exit, and enough visibility to detect ambushes. The merchant was already there, with a cart pulled by 2 mules. He was a middle-aged man with a prominent belly and small eyes that moved too fast. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a red handkerchief around his neck. He smiled when he saw Nahale approaching. "Friend," he exclaimed with a voice that was too loud, "I bring what you asked for. Salt, flour, a little tobacco, all of first quality." Nahale dismounted without rushing, and Yara stayed on her horse slightly behind, observing. The merchant looked at her with curiosity. "New companion?" he asked with a tone that tried to be jovial. "Keep quiet and show what you bring," Nahale said without inflection. The merchant shrugged and began to unload sacks from the cart. He took out one of salt, another of flour, and a wrapped package that supposedly contained tobacco. He placed them on the ground and waited. Nahale inspected the merchandise with expert hands. He was opening the sacks, smelling and feeling. He seemed satisfied. "How much?" he asked. 50 silver pesos, responded the merchant. "How did we agree?" Nahale frowned. "We had said 40. Prices went up, friend. It is not my fault. Salt is scarce." While they negotiated, Yara observed. Something did not add up. The sacks seemed correct at first glance, but there were small details that caught her attention. The sack of salt, for example, was sewn with a different stitch at the top. It looked as if it had been opened and closed again, and it weighed less than it should. Yara knew it because she had carried sacks of salt for years in her father's store. A sack of that size should weigh at least 20 pounds. This one looked full, but when the wind moved it slightly, it swayed too easily. She dismounted without making a noise and approached. Nahale looked at her with a warning in his eyes, but he did not stop her. Yara knelt next to the sack of salt and ran her hands over it. She was feeling the weight and the distribution. Then she looked at the merchant. "Can I open this?" she asked. The man frowned. "It is already open. Your friend checked it. I want to see to the bottom." The merchant looked at Nahale. "What is this? Do you not trust me?" Nahale did not respond. He gestured to Yara to continue. She took her small knife and cut the top seam with care. She put her hand to the bottom of the sack. Her fingers touched salt on the surface, but further down she felt something different. Sand. She took out a handful and showed it. "Half of the sack is sand mixed with salt," she said calmly, "and it does not weigh what it should. There are perhaps 10 pounds of real salt here. The rest is filler." The silence that followed was tense. The merchant grew pale and took a step back. Nahale approached the sack, put his hand in himself, and verified it. When he took out sand between his fingers, his expression hardened. "Are you robbing me?" he said with a low and dangerous voice. No. There was a mistake. Someone packed it wrong. I did not know. Lie." Nahale turned toward the other men. "Check everything." They checked. The flour was fine, but the tobacco was of inferior quality, mixed with dry leaves of no value. The merchant had tried to deceive them on almost half of the merchandise. Nahale grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. "You have sold us garbage at the price of gold. How many times have you done it?" The man stuttered, attempting to give excuses. Nahale released him with disgust. "Take your cart and leave. If you appear again, there will be no conversation." The merchant did not wait any longer. He climbed onto the cart with clumsy haste and urged the mules to move quickly. He disappeared through the canyon, raising dust. Nahale turned toward Yara. "How did you know?" "The weight. A sack full of salt weighs differently than one full of sand, and the seam was remade. Someone opened it after packing it." Nahale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Kohte will want to know about this." Back at the camp, Yara felt that something had changed. The men who rode with her no longer ignored her completely. One of them, a young man named Bitsil, asked her a direct question for the first time. "Did your father teach you that?" "Yes," responded Yara. "He used to say that honest merchants are rare, that you always have to verify." Bitsil nodded. "Your father was intelligent." When they arrived at the camp, Nahal went directly to Kohte's tent, and Yara waited outside. She was conscious of the stares she received from others in the camp. Some seemed curious, others distrustful. Sei approached and asked her what had happened. Yara told her briefly. "You did well," said Sei without smiling. "But be careful. There are those who will think that you are making yourself important." It was not an empty warning, and Yara understood it. There were people in the camp who saw her as a threat. They saw her as someone who could gain influence that she did not deserve. She would have to move carefully. Kohte called her. That night she entered his tent, where he was sitting near the fire, studying a rough map drawn on leather. He looked up when she entered. "Nahale says you detected the deception before he did." "Yes. Can you do it again?" "I can try." Kohte observed her like someone who evaluates a new weapon, deciding if it is reliable. "We will take you to the next exchanges. You will verify what they sell us. If you keep finding traps, you will have a place here. If you fail, and it costs us dearly, you will answer for it." It was not gratitude. It was an acknowledgement of utility. For Yara, in that moment, it was enough. The following weeks established a new rhythm in Yara's life. She was no longer just the delivered woman who did unimportant tasks. Now she accompanied Nahale and others in the exchanges with merchants. Her job was simple. She was to verify that what they bought was real, that the weights were correct, that the quality corresponded to the price, and she did it well. In the second exchange, she detected that the blankets they were sold had a weave that was too loose. It would unravel with the first wash. In the third, she noticed that the corn was mixed with rotten grains that would attract weevils. Every time she pointed out a problem, Nahali listened to her. The merchants protested, and some became offended. But in the end, they either corrected the deception or lost the business. The reputation of the group began to change. Now the merchants knew that they could not scam them easily, but with that utility came tension as well. Some in the camp, Especially the older men who had been with Kohte from the beginning looked at Yara with growing distrust. It was not just that she was a woman or that she was white. It was that she was acquiring influence in decisions that previously only the warriors made. They spoke in low voices, making comments that Yara heard halfway when she passed near the campfires. Kohte trusts her too much. It is a trap. The white people sent her to spy on us. When she betrays us, it will be too late to do anything. Yara knew that those words were dangerous. The distrust, if it grew enough, could become action. She needed more than to be useful in the exchanges. She needed to prove that she was not a threat, but she did not know how to do it without appearing to try too hard. The opportunity arrived in an unexpected manner. One night, one of the children in the camp, a little 5-year-old boy named Nako, became ill with a high fever. His mother, a young woman named Shadi, was desperate. The boy trembled wrapped in blankets, his skin burning, his lips dry and cracked. Tseyi prepared herbal infusions, but the fever did not go down. Shadi cried in silence, holding her son, while others observed with helplessness. In the territory, without adequate medicines, a fever could kill in days. Yara observed from a distance without daring to approach. She did not have knowledge of miraculous healing. She was not a healer, but she remembered what her father did when she fell ill as a child. Discipline and method, temperature control with fresh water, regular doses of liquid to avoid dehydration, and a ventilated environment. It was not magic, it was constant care. She approached Tseyi and spoke softly. "Can I help?" Tseyi looked at her with weariness. "Do you know anything about fevers? I know that he needs to stay cool and drink water. I know that his temperature must be lowered little by little." Tseyi doubted, but the condition of the boy was critical, so she nodded. "Do what you can." Yara knelt next to Shadi. "I need clean cloths and fresh water. A lot of water." During the following hours, Yara worked with silent dedication. She wet the cloths in fresh water and placed them on the forehead, neck, and wrists of the boy. Every time Nako regained consciousness, she gave him small sips of water with salt. It was something her father had taught her to replenish what the body lost with sweat. She controlled the blankets so that they did not suffocate him, but also did not leave him cold. She did not shout orders, nor did she act as if she knew everything. She simply did the work with the same precision she used to verify sacks of salt or mend saddles. At dawn, the fever began to drop. Nako stopped trembling, and his breathing calmed down. When he finally opened his eyes and asked for water with a weak voice, Shadi cried with relief. She hugged her son, and then, without saying a word, she took Yara's hand and squeezed it. Nothing more was needed. The news of what had happened spread through the camp, and Yara did not boast or seek recognition. She returned to her tasks, as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. The women who previously ignored her now greeted her with a nod of the head. Tseyi, who had always been distant, gave her an extra blanket that night. "The boy could have died," she said simply. "He did not die thanks to you." Kohte called her 2 days later. When she entered his tent, he was alone, cleaning his rifle with methodical movements. He did not look up immediately. "Shadi says you saved her son. I did what I could. Why?" Yara did not expect that question. She took a moment to think. "Because he was a sick child. I did not need more of a reason." Kohte stopped cleaning the rifle and looked at her. "Some here thought that you were a spy, that Amalia sent you to bring information. And now they think that perhaps she sent you, but you do not know what for. Or that you are too foolish to be an effective spy." He paused. "Or that you simply are who you say you are. I never claimed to be anything more than what I am." "Exactly." Kohte returned to his rifle. "Keep it up. Utility buys respect. Respect buys security." It was his way of saying that she had passed another test. Yara left the tent with something she had not felt since she arrived at the camp. It was the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive here. But survival was not enough. Every night, before sleeping, Yara thought about the house she had left, about Amalia sleeping peacefully, knowing that the problem had been resolved. She thought about the land that carried the name Valdés, land that Amalia would now control without opposition. She thought about her father, about the promises he had made to protect her future. Rage began to grow in her chest, slow but constant. It was not an explosive rage, but the kind that settles in the bones and becomes determination. Yara did not yet know how, but she knew that someday she would find a way to reclaim what belonged to her. For now, she could only wait, work, and stay alive. The months passed and the camp moved 3 times, following routes that only Kohte and his closest men knew completely. Yara learned to read the signs of the territory. Which rocky formations meant water was near, which plants indicated firm ground to camp, how to interpret the flight of birds to detect human presence in the distance. They did not teach her directly. She learned by observing, listening to fragmented conversations, and asking questions when the moment seemed appropriate. Her relationship with Kohte evolved from mutual distrust to something more complex. He was not a man of soft words or affectionate gestures. He showed approval with the absence of criticism and disapproval with cutting silence. But there were brief and unexpected moments where Yara saw something different in him. One afternoon, while she was mending a harness near his tent, Kohte asked her about her father. What kind of man was he? Yara looked up, surprised by the question. He was fair, tired, but fair. He used to say that the given word was worth more than gold, because gold is spent and the word remains. Kohte nodded slowly. That is why he did not survive. The harshness of those words could have sounded cruel, but Yara understood what he was really saying. Her father had lived in a world that no longer existed, where honesty was currency of exchange and not an exploitable weakness. Kohte lived in the real world, where the given word was only worth something if it was backed by force. Perhaps, Yara said, but I remember him, and that is more than what many leave behind. Something changed in Kohte's expression, so subtle that it was almost unnoticeable. It was respect, perhaps, or acknowledgement that she understood things that others did not see. It was during that time of relative stability that the White Scout arrived. He appeared one morning at one of the exchange points, riding a well-fed Percheron horse and carrying saddlebags that looked loaded. He was not a merchant. He was another type of man. He was a seeker of information, moving between towns and borders, selling news to whoever paid, and hiding intentions behind easy smiles. Nahale recognized him from previous encounters. The man was named Garrett, and he had a reputation for being useful, but unreliable. He sold true information when it was convenient, and lies when they paid better. That morning he brought news about troop movements in the territory. This information could be valuable to avoid dangerous encounters. Kohte agreed to meet with him on neutral ground, an open area where any betrayal would be visible. Yara was included in the group, not as protection, but as a verifier. If Garrett tried to sell false information, she could detect inconsistencies in the details. When Garrett saw Yara, his eyes lit up with recognition. "Valdés?" he asked with poorly hidden surprise. "Yara Valdés." Yara's heart accelerated, but she maintained a neutral expression. "Do you know me? I saw your father several times in the town. He bought provisions from his store." Garrett looked at Kohte with poorly contained curiosity. "I did not know that the Valdés girl was with Apaches." "Now you know," Kohte said with a flat voice. "Did you bring what you promised?" Garrett hesitated, and his attention was still on Yara. There was something calculating in his look, as if he were evaluating possibilities. Yes, of course. The troops are moving toward the south, avoiding the northern routes for now. 2 well-armed patrols, following reports of a group that attacked a convoy last week. Kohte listened to the details, making specific questions. Garrett responded with information that seemed solid. Too solid, thought Yara. Too detailed to be just a casual rumor. When they finished, Garrett approached Yara with an expression that tried to be friendly. "It must be hard for you, girl, to be here far from your people. I am fine. Your stepmother is worried about you, you know. I heard her talk in the town. She says you were taken against your will." Yara almost laughed at the blatant lie. "My stepmother is worried. She says that she misses you, that she made a mistake." Garrett lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. "I could help you return if you want. I know safe paths. We could arrange something." There it was. The offer that was too easy. The rescue that asked for nothing in return. Yara felt the weight of the trap even before she could articulate it completely. She looked at Kohte, who observed the exchange with an illegible expression. "I do not need to return," Yara said finally. Garrett frowned. "Think about it carefully, girl. This is not a life for someone like you. Your stepmother would be willing to forgive, to receive you back." "No." The response was firm. Garrett studied her face, looking for doubt, and found none. He shrugged. "As you wish. But if you change your mind, I will be in the town for 2 more weeks. Ask for me in Mercer's canteen." He said goodbye with false courtesy and left. When he was out of hearing range, Kohte turned toward Yara. "That was a trap. I know. How? Because Amalia does not make mistakes. If she delivered me here, it was because she wanted me to stay here or to never return. She does not want me back." Kohte observed her with that intensity that always seemed to see beyond words. The scout sells information. If someone paid him to find you, it was not to rescue you. Then, for what? To ensure that you do not return to claim anything. Kohte paused. "Your stepmother delivered you as a punishment, but the punishment had a purpose. What does she have to lose if you return?" Yara had not articulated the thought completely until that moment, but now, with Kohte's words making it clear, she understood. "The land, my inheritance. If I am dead or missing, she can claim it all." "Exactly. And if a scout offers to take you back without charging, it is because someone else is paying. Someone who wants you to not arrive alive." The realization fell upon Yara like ice water. If she had accepted Garrett's offer, she would have died on the way. An accident, an Apache ambush, any story that Amalia could sell to the town. And with her dead, with no witnesses, with no claims, the land would pass completely into the hands of the stepmother. "You warned me," said Yara in a low voice. "I warned you because I do not allow my decisions to be manipulated by white people with dirty plans. If you are going to die, it will not be because someone else planned it. It will be because I decided it, or because you made a mistake." It was a brutal declaration, but it was also protection. Kohte had not saved her out of love or out of kindness. He had saved her because he refused to be a pawn in someone else's game. And in that refusal, Yara found unexpected security. The days after the encounter with Garrett brought subtle changes. Kohte assigned extra vigilance on the routes that Yara usually took to bring water or gather firewood. Nahale, who now treated her with something resembling respect, taught her signals to use if she detected danger. A certain whistle that imitated birds, and a specific way of placing stones on the path. They were not lessons given to prisoners. They were lessons given to members of the group. Yara processed all of this with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. She had not asked to be protected. She had not asked to become something more than a useful burden. But it was happening anyway, and with it came a responsibility that she did not know if she wanted. One night, while organizing her few belongings in the tent, she now shared only with Tseye. Her fingers brushed against something strange in the hem of her spare dress. It was the dress she had brought from Amalia's house, the one she had worn on the day of her delivery. She had not checked it carefully since then. She had simply put it away, preferring to wear more practical clothes that Tseye had given her. But now, Passing her fingers over the fabric, she felt an abnormal thickness in the hem. It was not the usual padding of the hems. It was something more rigid, more deliberate. Carefully, she began to unpick the stitches. The thread was different from the rest of the dress, thicker, less professional, as if someone had sewn it in a hurry, without caring about aesthetics. Inside the hem, folded in multiple creases to make it small, she found a paper. Yara's heart accelerated. She unfolded the document with hands that trembled slightly. It was a legal writing with seals and signatures. She recognized her father's handwriting in some places and a notary's in others. It was the property title of the Valdés lands, the official record that defined limits, water rights, and legitimate heirs. She read the document twice to make sure she understood what it meant. Her father had named her the sole heir, with a clear provision that in case of his death, the property would pass to her directly, without intermediaries. Amalia had no legal right over the lands. She had only been a temporary administrator until Yara reached legal age, something that had already happened 2 years ago. The document had been hidden in her dress by someone. Yara closed her eyes, trying to remember the last days in the house before being delivered. There had been confusion. Amalia giving quick orders, preparing Yara's bundle in a hurry. Who had had access to the dress? Who had known enough to understand the importance of the document and hide it in a way that Amalia would not discover it? And then she remembered Lucia, the old servant who had worked for her father since before Yara was born. Lucia, who knew where the important papers were kept, who had seen Amalia frantically search for something in the dead father's desk. Lucia had sewn that dress years ago, and she knew every hem. It had been she who had given the bundle to Yara on the day of the delivery, with a look that tried to say something, but could not with words. Yara felt burning tears in her eyes. Lucia had given her the only real weapon against Amalia, the only proof that could destroy the stepmother's plans. But she had also given her a heavy burden. Now Yara knew exactly what was at stake and how much she had lost. Tsei entered the tent and saw Yara's expression, the paper in her hands. "What is that?" "Proof," said Yara with a trembling voice. "Proof that my stepmother robbed me." Tsei sat across from her. "Show me." Yara explained what the document meant, although Tsei could not read the words, but she understood the weight of what it represented. "With this, you could return, reclaim what is yours." "Yes." "Will you do it?" Yara stayed silent for a long time. The question was more complicated than it seemed. Returning meant confronting Amalia with proof. It meant going before a judge in a town where Apaches were hunted, where she would be seen as a traitor for living with them. It meant the risk of death before arriving before any authority. "I do not know if I can do it alone," she admitted finally. Sei nodded. "Then speak with Kohte." That night, Yara waited until the camp calmed down. Then she walked toward Kohte's tent. A light still shone inside. She announced herself from outside, waiting for permission. He made her enter. "It is late," said Kohte, without looking up from a map he was studying. "I found something. I need to show it to you." Now he did look at her, and Yara handed him the document. Kohte studied it, although he could not read the legal words. "What does it say?" "That my father left the land directly to me. That Amalia has no right over it. That if I present this before a judge, she loses all control. That is why she delivered you here. That is why she wants you dead." Kohte folded the paper carefully and returned it to her. "What will you do?" "I do not know. If I go alone, I will not arrive alive at the town. And if I arrive, I do not know if the judge will listen to me after having been with you. They will say that I am crazy, that the document is false, probably, but it is the only thing I have. It is the only way to close this." Kohte remained in silence for a long time, looking at the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Amalia used you. She delivered you here to get rid of you. Now she tries to ensure it with that scout. She will not finish until you are dead or completely inaccessible.
I know!
If you let her win, she will try something else. Perhaps not against you directly, but against us. She will say that we forced her to do this, that we are a threat. She will use your disappearance as a justification to bring soldiers to seek revenge. Yara had not considered that. Do you think she would do it? It is what I would do if I wanted to eliminate a problem and gain sympathy at the same time. Kohte looked directly at her. Your problem with Amalia is also my problem. Not because I care about you, but because she can turn you into an excuse to persecute us. It was brutal honesty, but it was also an implicit offer. Would you help me go to the town? I will consider the possibility, but not to save your inheritance, but to cut the threat before it becomes a war. Yara nodded. She did not expect nobility or romance in this. She expected strategy, and Kohte offered it to her. What would you need to know to decide? Times, routes, who in the town could listen to you without killing you first? And what will you do after, if you win? If you recover your land, will you return to live as a peaceful white woman? Or will there be consequences for us for having helped you? It was a fair question. Kohte protected his people first, always. He would not risk the group for personal feelings, and Yara understood it. If I win, I will use the land to close debts that my father left. I will establish that Amalia cannot use my name to justify anything against you. And then she paused, realizing something while she said it. Afterward, I will not return to live as a peaceful white woman, because I am no longer that person. Kohte studied her face, looking for a lie. He found none. Think about it for 3 more days. If you remain decided, we will speak of a plan. The 3 days he gave her to think were long and full of doubt. Yara worked on her usual tasks, but her mind was always somewhere else, weighing options that all seemed bad. Every path had risks, and few clear benefits. Sei noticed her distraction but did not press. She simply worked next to her in silence, occasionally making practical comments about the territory or about people in the camp. It was her way of saying that she was available if Yara needed to talk. One afternoon, while they were mending a tent that the wind had torn, Sei finally asked directly, "Have you decided?" Almost, "I think I have to do it, not for the land." Exactly. To close something that remained open. I understand that. Sei paused in her sewing. My husband died 7 years ago in an ambush by soldiers. We never recovered his body. For a long time I could not move forward because that door was open waiting for closure. Finally, I had to accept that some closures will never come, but this one could come. You have the document. Yes, and you also have the risk of dying while trying. Sei looked at her with seriousness. Kohte is a good strategist, but he cannot control everything. If you go to the town, there will be a moment where you will be alone before people who could hate you or kill you. Are you ready for that? Yara considered the question honestly. I do not know if anyone is truly ready for that, but I do know that I cannot continue being the woman that Amalia decided to discard. I have to be the one who fights back. Sei nodded and returned to sew. Then, go with care. On the 3rd day, Yara sought out Kohte. She found him with Nahale and 2 other men studying routes on the leather map. When she approached, he gestured for the others to retire. They were left alone under the awning of the main tent. You decided. Yes, I am going to go. Kohte nodded, as if he expected that response. Then, let us plan. The town is 4 days of travel from here. There are 3 possible routes. 2 cross territory that is being patrolled by soldiers. The 3rd is longer, but safer. How much longer? 2 extra days, but it avoids places where they would see you from afar. We will use that one. Good, now who will go with you? Kohte marked points on the map. I will go, obviously. My presence guarantees that no one from the town acts without thinking twice. Nahale will come too, and Bitsil. 3 of us is enough for protection without looking like an invasion. Yara processed that. Will your presence not make things more difficult? The town hates you. They fear me. It is different. Fear makes people think before acting. Hate only makes them stupid. Kohte looked directly at her. But your point is valid. When we arrive, we will go directly to the place where the authorities are. Where is that? The judge has an office next to the church. His name is Bradford. My father knew him. Do you trust him? I do not know if I trust anyone there, but my father used to say that Bradford followed the law when it was convenient for him. If the document is clear, he will have to recognize it or risk his reputation. And your stepmother, where will she be? In the house. It is large with a closed courtyard. Amalia does not go out much. She makes others manage her business. Kohte drew lines on the map with charcoal. Then we will enter from the east side of the town, avoiding the area where your house is. We will go straight to Bradford. You will present the document. I will be present to ensure that no one interrupts you violently. If Bradford recognizes the document, good. If he refuses, we will leave and seek another way. What other way? I do not know yet. But we will not die in that town for a piece of paper. His tone was firm. This is important, Yara, but not more important than the lives of my people. I understand. They spent the next hour going over details. What would Yara say? How would she present the case? What responses would they expect from different people? Kohte was methodical, asking questions that forced Yara to think about contingencies she had not considered. And if Bradford says that the document is false, it has official seals and the signature of a notary, but he could lie. Then, we need a witness who has seen it before. Did anyone else know of this document? Yara thought. Lucia, the old servant. She worked for my father. She probably knows where the original papers were. Do you trust her? She hid the document in my dress. She risked something to give me this opportunity. Good. If we can reach her, better. Kohte marked another point. Where does she live? In a room behind the main house, but Amalia watches her. Then we will have to be quick. The preparations took 2 more days. Nahale and Bitsil were informed of the plan. Both accepted without protesting, although Bitsil asked the obvious. What do we gain from this? Kohte responded with patience. We gain that the white woman who sent Yara here loses power to continue causing problems. We gain that Yara closes her business and stops being a rope that others can pull. We gain time without soldiers, using her disappearance as an excuse to look for us. Bitsil nodded, convinced. The night before leaving, Yara could not sleep. She stared at the ceiling of the tent, listening to the familiar sounds of the camp. She had spent months here. She had learned to survive. She had found a place among people who had no reason to accept her. And now she was going to put all of that at risk for a document that might or might not change something. Tsei woke up and saw that Yara was awake. Fear? Yes. Good. Fear keeps you alive. And if it does not work, then you return here and we continue as before. We will not die for this, and Kohte will see to it. It was a strange but effective consolation. Yara closed her eyes and finally slept. They departed before dawn. The group was small. Kohte, Nahale, Bitsil, and Yara. They carried provisions for 8 days and enough weapons to defend themselves, but not to attack. The message was clear. They were not going to make war, but neither would they be easy victims. The journey was silent and tense. Every time they saw movement in the distance, they stopped and observed until they were sure it was not a threat. They camped without a fire, ate cold food, and slept in shifts. Kohte maintained strict discipline. It was not a time for errors. On the 5th day, they arrived in sight of the town. They stopped on a nearby hill, observing from a distance. The place looked small and vulnerable under the afternoon sun. Yara felt nausea in her stomach. This was the place where she had grown up, where her father was buried, where Amalia slept peacefully thinking she had won. "Ready?" asked Kohte, and Yara took a deep breath. "Ready." They entered the town at dusk, when the shadows were long and most people were dining in their houses. It was not a coincidence. Kohte had planned to arrive at that hour to minimize immediate encounters. Fewer witnesses meant less panic, less possibility of spontaneous violence. Even so, they did not go unnoticed. A boy playing in the street saw them first and ran shouting toward his house. A woman drawing water from a well dropped her bucket and crossed herself. An armed man keeping watch in front of a store saw them and entered quickly, surely to get more weapons. Yara felt the weight of those stairs like stones against her back. Kohte rode in front with a posture that was not aggressive, but neither was it submissive. Nahale and Bitsil flanked Yara, silent protectors. She kept her eyes straight ahead, breathing slowly, reminding herself that she had the right to be here. This was her land as much as anyone else's. The office of Judge Bradford was in an adobe building next to the church, just as Yara remembered. There was light in the windows, a sign that someone was inside. Kohte dismounted first, then helped Yara get down. The other two remained mounted, vigilant. "You enter first," said Kohte in a low voice. "I will be behind. If there is a problem, exit quickly." Yara nodded and walked toward the door. Her legs trembled, but her steps were firm. She knocked 3 times. There was silence, then footsteps, and the door opened. Judge Bradford was there, a man of about 50 years, with a gray beard and a perpetually tired expression. When he saw Yara, his eyes widened. "Miss Valdés." "Yes, Mr. Bradford. We were told that you had." His gaze went beyond Yara, seeing Kohte behind. His face paled. "What is this?" "I come to present a legal document," said Yara, with a voice that tried to sound firmer than she felt. "I need you to see it." Bradford hesitated, clearly frightened by Kohte's presence, but he was also a man who lived by the law and by maintaining order. He could not reject a legal petition without a reason. "Enter alone." "He comes with me," said Yara, pointing to Kohte. "He is my protection." That is, "Oh, Mr. Bradford." Yara took out the folded document from her dress. "I have the title to the Valdés lands. My father left it to me. I come to register that Doña Amalia has no legal right over them." Bradford looked at the paper, looked at Kohte, and looked at Yara. Finally, he sighed and opened the door wider. "Enter, but leave the weapons outside." The Kohte made a gesture that he carried no visible weapons, which was technically true, although Yara knew that he had a hidden knife. They entered the office that smelled of old paper and ink. Bradford closed the door and went to sit behind his desk. He turned on another lamp and extended his hand. "Show me the document." Yara handed it to him. Bradford unfolded it carefully and began to read. His eyes moved quickly over the words, his expression changing from skepticism to surprise to something resembling uncomfortable recognition. He read twice, verifying seals and signatures. "This document seems legitimate," he said finally. "I recognize the signature of Notary Mendez. He handled your father's affairs." He looked up. "But there is a problem." "What is it?" "Doña Amalia presented documents 6 months ago, declaring that you had abandoned the territory voluntarily, that you had ceded your rights in writing. Based on that, the lands were transferred to her name." Yara felt the floor move beneath her feet. "That is a lie. I never signed anything." "Do you have proof of that?" "The proof is that I am here now with the original document that my father left me." Bradford leaned back in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "Miss Valdés, understand my position. If I accept this document, I will be saying that Doña Amalia committed fraud. That is a serious accusation. I will need more than your word. You have my document, you have the seals, and she has the supposed paper of cession with her falsified signature," said Yara with a tense voice. She falsified my signature. Can you prove it? Yara thought quickly. Lucia can prove it, the servant of the house. She saw when Amalia was looking for my father's documents. She knows that I never signed anything. Bradford frowned. The old servant. She is under Doña Amalia's roof. Her testimony could be questioned. Then, let us bring her here, intervened Kohte for the first time. His voice was calm, but firm. If the woman testifies that there was no signature, will you accept that? Bradford looked at him with evident discomfort. And who are you to demand anything? Someone who ensures that this woman is not silenced again. Kohte took a step forward. My people have no interest in your white laws, but we will also not allow them to rob whoever is under our protection. Under your protection. Bradford almost laughed nervously. She is white. She was, corrected Kohte. Now she is what she chooses to be. The silence that followed was heavy. Bradford looked at Yara with new comprehension, as if he truly saw her for the first time. She was not the frightened girl who had been delivered months ago. She was someone else. It is all right, said Bradford finally. I will bring Lucia to testify, but this will take time, and meanwhile, you will need a safe place to stay. We will stay outside the town, said Kohte. But if something happens to Yara while we wait, I will return, and I will not be patient. It was not an empty threat. Bradford knew it. He nodded, pale. No one will harm her. You have my word. Your word is worth what your actions demonstrate, said Kohte. He turned to Yara. We will wait. If this does not resolve in 3 days, we are leaving. They exited the office into the fresh night air. There were more people in the streets now, observing from a prudent distance. Yara saw familiar faces, people who had bought in her father's store, who had seen her grow up. Some looked at her with something akin to compassion, others with disgust or contempt. She had returned from living with Apaches. That marked her in ways that would never be erased. They mounted and rode out of the town toward the temporary camp they had prepared before entering. Once there, Nahale and Bitsil set up guard, while Kohte sat with Yara near the small fire they allowed themselves that night. You did well in there, said Kohte. It served for nothing. Amalia falsified a document with my signature. Bradford believes I have to prove it. You will prove it when they bring the servant, and if Amalia threatened her, and if Lucia is too scared to speak. Kohte looked at her. Then we will find another way. But first, wait. Give the truth a chance to appear. It was simple, but sensible advice. Yara nodded, feeling the weight of exhaustion fall over her. She had come this far. She could only hope that it was enough. The 3 days of waiting were slow torture. The camp was hidden in a little-used ravine, far enough from the town to avoid accidental discovery, but close enough to watch movement. Bitsil took turns climbing to a high point to observe with a rough spyglass that Kohte carried. He reported every change, patrols that passed, merchants who arrived, once a group of cowboys that almost detected their position. And time passed, alternating between restlessness and preparation. Kohte made her practice what she would say when the moment for testimony arrived. Do not use complicated words. Do not get emotional. Say the simple facts. The document is yours. Your father left it to you. You never ceded it. Leave it to Lucia to tell the rest. But the question that tormented Yara was whether Lucia would have the courage to speak. Amalia was not a woman who tolerated betrayal, and testifying against her would be exactly that. What punishment would the old servant face? Loss of work? Something worse? On the 3rd day, shortly after noon, Nahale returned from an observation point with news. There is movement toward the judge's office. 3 people, Bradford, an older woman, and another younger woman in a fine dress. Amalia, said Yara, feeling her throat close. Kohte stood up. It is time. Let us go. They entered the town with the same precaution as before, but this time there was less surprise. People knew they were near. There were rumors circulating. Some townspeople simply closed doors when they saw them approaching. Others observed with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. The judge's office was full when they arrived. Bradford was sitting behind his desk with a serious expression. On one side was Lucia, the old servant, with trembling hands crossed over her lap. On the other side was Amalia, Yara's stepmother. She had aged in the months since the delivery. She had more wrinkles, more gray hair, more harshness in her gaze. She dressed in complete black, like a professional widow with a silver brooch at the neck. When she saw Yara enter with Kohte behind, her expression went from surprise to calculated anger. "Then it is true," said Amalia, with a voice that tried to sound hurt. "You returned with them." "I returned to reclaim what is mine," responded Yara. Her voice sounded firmer than she expected. Bradford cleared his throat. "Miss Valdés, we are here to resolve the matter of the lands. I have asked Lucia to testify about the documents and their handling. Are you ready to listen?" "Yes." Bradford turned to the servant. "Lucia, under oath, tell us what you know about the document of cession that Doña Amalia presented 6 months ago." Lucia swallowed hard. Her eyes went to Amalia, who looked at her with silent warning. Then they looked at Yara, and something in her expression softened. "There never was such a document, sir." "How do you know?" "Because I organized all of Mr. Valdés's papers. I knew every document on his desk. When he died, Doña Amalia searched for days for something that would give her control over the lands. She did not find it." Lucia paused, breathing shakily. "Then she asked me to look for any paper signed by Miss Yara, letters, receipts, anything with her signature." "For what?" "She did not say directly, but days later, a document appeared that supposedly Miss Yara had signed, ceding her rights. I had never seen it before." Amalia stood up abruptly. "You are lying. You are an ungrateful servant who always wanted more than you deserved." "Sit down, Doña Amalia," ordered Bradford with firmness. "Lucia, continue." The servant drew courage from some deep place. The signature on that document was not natural. Miss Yara signs with a particular inclination, something she learned from her father. The document that Doña Amalia presented had a straighter signature, as if someone had copied the letters carefully, but without the natural movement. "This is ridiculous," protested Amalia. "This woman is loyal to Yara, out of sentimentality. Her testimony is worth nothing." Bradford took 2 papers from his desk. "I have been investigating while we waited. I have here the document that you presented, Doña Amalia, and I have a letter that Yara wrote to her father years ago, which was in the archives of his store. The signatures are different, notably different. The silence that followed was absolute, and Yara felt she could barely breathe. Bradford placed the 2 documents side by side, where everyone could see them. The difference was obvious, even to untrained eyes. The signature on the supposed document of cession was a careful but imperfect imitation. "Doña Amalia," said Bradford with a grave voice, "it seems that you have presented a falsified document before this office. That is fraud, a serious offense." Amalia paled, but her voice maintained control. "It was a mistake. An incompetent notary prepared the document based on what I told him. The fault is his, not mine." "What notary?" "One who was passing through the town. I do not remember his name." "Convenient." Bradford turned to Yara. "Miss Valdés, your original document seems legitimate." "The seals are correct. Notary Mendez is known and reliable. Based on this evidence, I declare that you are the legitimate heir to the Valdés lands. Doña Amalia must return any income she has obtained from the property and vacate the house within 30 days. Yara felt her legs go weak. She had won. She had truly won. She looked at Lucia, who had tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Amalia stood up with a sudden movement. "This does not end here. I will appeal. I will bring witnesses. I will not allow a woman who lives with savages to rob me of what I built." Kohte, who had remained silent the entire time, spoke then. You already lost. Accept the defeat, or make it worse for yourself. Amalia looked at him with pure hatred. You do not have a voice here, monster. I have the voice that she gave me, and that is enough. Kohte took a step toward Amalia, his presence filling the space. You tried to discard her like garbage. You paid for them to deliver her to me, expecting her to die. When that did not work, you sent a scout to make sure. You failed in everything, and now she has returned stronger than what you were capable of destroying. Amalia did not respond. She simply left the office with a rigid back, maintaining the appearance of dignity, although everyone in the room knew that she had been defeated. Bradford wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Miss Valdés, you will need to sign some documents to make this official. Can you return tomorrow? Yes. And Bradford looked at Kohte with discomfort. What do you plan to do now? Will you return to live here? Yara looked at Kohte, then back to Bradford. I am still deciding that. That night Yara slept in the house that had been her father's, the house that now legally was hers again. Lucia had prepared a room, changing sheets and shaking off the dust that had accumulated. The old servant cried when Yara thanked her for her testimony. Your father took me out of poverty when I had nothing. I owed him my loyalty, and I owe it to you as well. What will you do now? Amalia will throw you out of her new place. It does not matter. I am old but not useless. I will find work in another house. Yara thought for a moment. Stay here. If I decide to sell the land or rent it, I will need someone trustworthy to manage it. And if I decide to stay, well, I will still need help. Lucia nodded, new hope in her tired eyes. But Yara did not sleep well that night. The house was full of ghosts, memories of her father, of her childhood, of the woman she had been before everything changed. The walls reminded her of a life that no longer felt like her own. She got up before dawn and went out to the patio where her father had planted a mesquite tree years ago. The tree had grown, its branches extending toward the gray sky of the early morning. Kohte was sitting on the fence of the patio waiting for her. He had not attempted to enter the house. He had camped outside with Nahale and Bitsil, maintaining a respectful distance from the space that now belonged to Yara. You did not sleep, observed Kohte. I could not. This feels strange. Strange how? Yara searched for the words. As if I had put on someone else's clothes. It is mine, it was made for me, but it no longer fits me well. Kohte nodded as if he understood perfectly. You have changed this place. No, I have changed so much that I do not know if I can return to live here. Yara sat on the fence next to him. Bradford asked me what I would do. I did not know what to answer. What do you want to do? It was a simple question, but loaded with weight. Yara looked at the horizon, where the mountains were drawn dark against the sky that was beginning to clear. Part of me wants to close this, to sell the land, to use the money to start something new in another place. But another part feels that I must stay, that my father built this, and I owe respect to his memory. Your father is dead, said Kohte, without cruelty, only with honesty. You owe him nothing except to remember him. The decisions that you make now are yours alone. And what will you do? We will return to the mountains. We will move to the summer camp as always. Life continues, without me. Kohte looked at her with that intensity that always saw beyond words. You have to decide where you belong. I cannot decide for you. But you, what would you prefer? I would prefer that you were useful, that you continued doing the work you started, that you did not waste what you learned by returning to be a white woman who lives with fear. He paused. But more than that, I would prefer that you chose without obligation, that you came because you want to, not because you feel you must. Yara closed her eyes. The response was already in her heart. It had been there since before returning to the town, but she needed courage to admit it. Returning to live here would be giving up. It would be pretending that the months with you did not happen, that they did not change me, and I cannot do that. Then do not do it. But I also cannot simply let Amalia win again. If I abandon this, she will find a way to take control again. Kohte thought for a moment. Then use the land without living on it. Put it to work. Rent the fields to someone you trust. Use the income to close the debts your father left. Establish clearly that Amalia has no power, and afterward live where you really want to live. It was a practical solution that resolved problems without sacrificing truth. Yara felt a weight lift from her chest. That makes sense. The following days passed in intense activity, and Yara signed documents officializing her inheritance. She hired a lawyer from the neighboring town to handle the arrangements of renting the land to a family of honest farmers that she met through Bradford. She organized the payment of her father's remaining debts, closing accounts that had been open for years. She also ensured to establish publicly that Kohte and his people had not been kidnappers, but protectors. She gave testimony before Bradford, explaining how Amalia had delivered her with malicious intent and how Kohte had kept her safe. It was not a total pardon, nor a clearing of reputation for the Apaches, but it was an acknowledgement that not all encounters between white people and Apaches ended in violence. It was a small step towards something better. When everything was resolved, when the papers were signed and the debts paid, Yara packed what she really needed from the house. Not much. Some practical clothes, her mother's comb, letters from her father, a small family portrait. The rest she left for Lucia, who would now have a house to live in while administering the property. "Are you sure of this?" asked Lucia, when Yara explained her plans. "More sure than I have been of anything in a long time." Lucia hugged her, something she had never done when Yara was a child. "Your father would be proud, not that you recovered the land, but of who you have become." Yara left the town at dusk, riding next to Kohte, Nahale, and Bitsil. Some townspeople observed from windows, others looked away. Bradford raised a hand in formal farewell from the door of his office. Amalia was not visible. She had left the town days before, humiliated and without power. As they rode toward the mountains, Yara looked back once. She saw the house, the mesquite tree, the land that had belonged to her family. But she did not feel loss. She felt closure. The chapter that Amalia had tried to end with betrayal had been closed by Yara herself, with truth and courage. Kohte rode by her side in silence. After a while, he spoke without looking at her. Regretful. "Not sure. Ask me again in a month." He almost smiled. It was a rare gesture in Kohte. Small, meaningful. When they arrived at the camp, Tsei received her with hot food and a prepared fire. Other women greeted Yara with nods, a silent acceptance that she had returned. Shadi brought Nako, the boy that Yara had helped with the fever, who now ran healthy and strong. That night, sitting around the fire with people who had seen her at her worst moment and had accepted her anyway, Yara understood something fundamental. Family was not just blood, nor property, nor name. It was the place where you could be completely yourself and be valued for that. She had been delivered to the feared Apache as a punishment, but he had loved her like no one else, because in Kohte's language, loving was not pretty words or romantic gestures. It was protecting lives. It was preventing injustices from becoming deaths. It was offering space for someone to grow without being crushed. It was recognizing value and defending it even when it cost something. The story they would tell later would be simplified. A woman delivered to Apaches, returning transformed, claiming justice. But the truth was more complex and more beautiful. It was about finding strength in unexpected places, about refusing to be defined by the hate of others, about choosing every day who to be, instead of accepting who others said she should be. Yara Valdés, daughter of an honest merchant, heir to arid lands, now lived among rocks and wind with people who measured value in actions and not in words. And in that harsh,